sticking to his guns. It's a goal! It's a goal! Yes! Liam Brady!
Oh, isn't it a beautiful goal?
Oh, beautifully played. A little cross in there, and it's come through here. McAteer! A great goal!
Wow, it's a great goal.
Is it? It's unbelievable. Robbie Keane.
Wonderful day for Irish football.
Since television first came to Ireland a little over 40 years ago, the boys in green have been thrilling us with their exploits on the field as they recorded memorable victories over some of the top teams in the world. Let's celebrate the great players, the great moments, and the glorious goals that have given us such pleasure down through the years and earned us a reputation as formidable opponents both home and away.
Ireland-Spain in '65 was a huge match. Difficult. We've had a lot of big games in recent times, but back in '65, big matches in Dublin weren't all that frequent. It was television age was just beginning. There wasn't as much football on television, and the fact that Spain were coming to town was absolutely huge because the previous year in '64 they had reached the final of the European Championship.
Well, we had lost heavily in Seville in the first leg. We needed to win this one to stay in the competition.
One of the best I've ever been at, if not the best. I'd say the gates must have gone because my father and myself were there, and I'd say there was over 40,000 people there. So the gates had to go. We got in fairly early, but the atmosphere was absolutely brilliant. And I mean, the game itself, with Ireland winning 1-0, was supreme. I mean, you couldn't have asked for any better.
It was just such an exciting part of, my development in the soccer world, because I was gaga about soccer. That was it. It was nothing else in my life. And of course, this was the great opportunity to see the heroes in action.
The first thing I remember about that match was my father lifting me over the turnstiles, which we all were in those days, because he hadn't got the money to pay for me. But we went in, it was a huge crowd. I always remember that.
I remember being up in the terraces, high up there, across from the stand in Dalymount. And it was a fantastic occasion because the ground was packed. And the significance of that match to me was that it was the first time we ever beat a top nation in the World Cup. And it was a very exciting game. I remember Shea Brennan played in that match. That was his debut, and he was the first English-born player to play for Ireland, so that we had 9 First Division players in that team, which was unusual for us.
Ireland has a fairly decent team, including perhaps one of the greatest players ever played League of Ireland football, Frank O'Neill. And of course Giles, who has since been named the FAI's UEFA Player of the Half Century, and again I think rightly so. Anyway, Giles was fouled out on the right of midfield. Frank O'Neill took the free kick.
Free to Ireland, foul on Giles. And it's Frank O'Neill taking it. A good one, they're in after it. It's a goal! It's a goal! Iribar's put through his own goal! Look at him in anguish! Oh, look at the Spanish keeper in anguish! Ireland lead 1-0.
Now, Noel Cantwell, who was really a full-back or a centre-half, but Ireland were using him as a centre-forward at this stage. And he was a strong man. He put the fear of God in anybody. And the word was that he really put the fear of God in Iribar, the Spanish goalkeeper. Because Frank O'Neill floated in the free, close proximity of Cantwell to the goalkeeper. Now, was the goalkeeper frightened? Was he scared? Well, that's a secret between him and the Spanish laundry. 1-0.
Big Noel was never going to make it. He let a roar out of him, and Iribar, the goalkeeper, looked to see what was happening, and Big Noel was running at him. So next minute, Iribar took the ball and took it straight into the net, palmed it into the net himself, and that was the goal, 1-0. A great victory, great result, because they were a hell of a good Spanish team.
They took it very badly. They had a list of complaints. First of all, we were animals, especially Cantwell. Iribar claimed he was an animal. Secondly, the pitch, they said, was terrible. And after the match, when the Irish team went in to swap jerseys with them, they couldn't get into the Spanish dressing room because there was such a row going on. So they took it very badly.
Anything involving a Soviet team in any sport in the 60s and 70s had a dimension about it which is hard to explain now. They were, for the people in the West, they were like the boogeymen. Somebody put a picture of the team on the mantelpiece to keep the kids away from the fire. And that's what put any game against Russia, or the Soviet Union as they were then, put them apart. It was different to anything else.
The European Championship game between the Republic of Ireland and the Soviet Union. And it's good to see the crowds back again to create the sort of atmosphere that inspires a team.
At 2 o'clock, and I remember it distinctly, at 2 o'clock we went out for a warm-up. And the ground was nearly full, which is unheard of for an Irish crowd to be in so early. And I felt on the pitch, and I said to one or two of the lads, I think something special is going to happen today, that we're going to really win this game and play exceptionally well. And we did both.
This was a very big game because it was early in Giles's managerial career, and it was considered, it was felt that we'd do pretty well to scrape a draw.
But blocking always ready for the half chance. Here he is again, and he's in. The USSR had come to town, and they had a powerful team. But Giles was now the player manager, and he picked a good team. He was very clever and knew what he needed. Most of all, he had chosen a new midfielder who was to become one of the greatest ever. Long, hard fellow with a bit of a loping style called Liam Brady. This is Liam Brady, his first touch in senior international football.
My claim to fame was I was dropped for the start of Liam Brady's international career, which of course we know was an absolutely brilliant one. But I mean, it's funny the way it turns out, because watching that game from the touchline, it was fabulous.
Liam Brady showing his composure so early in the game.
I remember after about 15 to 20 minutes, Gilesy, who was being man-marked by a Russian player, saying, I'm going to play right back and let Brady run the show. Those were his words. He said, I'm going to play a fullback. And that guy followed him. And he just gave centre stage to Liam Brady, debut, in a huge game. He was magnificent that day. It was the best debut I've ever seen anywhere.
Givens. Brady. Good effort by young Brady. Now, if you were talking to Ray Tracy, no better man than Ray, if he doesn't have his banjo with him, to tell you that he made every one of those Don Givens goals. If he didn't have the last pass, he pulled away and made the space.
That's correct, I did make them all. Don Givens to this day won't admit it, but the reason I'm so ugly and Don is a very handsome man is that I took all his hits. He claims he did all my running, but no, Don was brilliant that day.
Giles. Kinnear. Givens is coming in. Oh, it's a beautiful goal, isn't it? A beautiful goal.
I remember the very first one, which came from the right, and the reason I remember it reminds me back to what we were talking about, Iribar, because the keeper was actually looking at me when he came for the cross.
And this will perhaps be a long one from Steve Highway. Tracy, hooked in by Don Givens.
Steve Highway crossed it. All I had to do was flick it on, and Don Givens stuck it in the back of the net. But it was top quality. It was a hell of a good goal from Don.
Don Givens had this innate ability to peel off his marker, could create the extra half yard of space, which gave him, was all he needed to score. And that was particularly effective in heading in the aerial situations, superb in the air. Somebody once remarked about Don Givens that his goals were like CIA buses. They came in bunches. He got 3, as you know, against the Soviet Union.
Giles has got Givens and Tracy to aim at. Givens' head.
When Givens caught fire, they were great days for Irish football.
There was no way that we were going to get beaten that day. I think we were in leading 2-0 at half-time. And Giles from a free kick plonked on the head for Givens to head the third one. But Don wouldn't have gotten the 3 goals if the rest hadn't been right. And right from the goalkeeper, all the way through, from Paddy Roach all the way through to Steve Highway at outside left. Everybody was immense. And it was a wonderful, wonderful team performance.
It's now over. It's all over at Dilliman Park. Arguably our greatest ever performance at international level.
France was beginning to put together the nucleus of the team that would win the European Championship in '84. Huge test for an Irish team, any Irish team, but particularly at that time.
Mulligan, the first Irishman with it.
Well, I mean, Cease was the outside left and Rocheteau was the outside right, and you had Lambert at centre forward, you had Trésor as a centre back, you had Platini. Platini, a wonderful player. And this was a wonderful French team.
Lansdowne Road full to whatever the capacity is for a soccer match. Perhaps around 48,000.
That day, Lansdowne Road was full to the rafters. I still go back and say it has never created an atmosphere like Dalymount, but if there was an atmosphere, that was the day.
This is Senegal. Rocheteau, look at the little turn. He's so quick, this fellow.
We had a bad start, as I recall, but settled well. Once we settled, we showed a kind of edge up front that had been missing in earlier games.
To Liam Brady, Mulligan's just gone up outside him. Has to get back on again. Great shot, Brady! Oh, what a shot and what a save!
Liam Brady was now in the side, a leading light in the side, and it was expected of Liam to do something special.
He was hugely important, and his goal on that day was quite clinical. You know, the French expected to get all pushed out. Somebody had cleared the ball. I think it was Trésor had cleared the ball, and then he immediately pushed out. But it went to Brady, and he read it perfectly.
Giles with the free. Now it's Brady. Oh, beautifully played. He's in. Yes, Liam Brady.
Very early, I don't know, it might have been 10, 15 minutes, he took a ball and he threw a shape, and I think he put about 4 of us out of position because he turned back the other way and had a crack, and it flitted right into the corner. It was a super goal, and yet nobody realised how good the goal was, because I thought he was going to pass it to me. McMartin, I think, thought he was going to pass it to him. Don probably expected the same pass. Next minute it's in the back of the net.
Some suspicion of handball, but I think you could see there that there wasn't. The referee played it on, and how cool the man was. Ireland lead 1-0, 10 minutes gone.
I recall somebody saying quite early in the match, I think we're looking sharp today. This is a game we can win.
They were a good French side, and I think that day our defenders did very, very well. Held on and managed to get a 1-0 result.
Beautiful play, and it's Mulligan who's got back to feed Kearns. Mulligan absolutely brilliant so far in this match.
Rocheteau come over from the right-hand side, and he spat on my face in Paris. So we tangled anyway, and the ball was won and so on. And the long studs were on, of course, because the pitch was, you needed the long studs, and I just happened to stand on his hand just to let him know that we were all about.
Is it over? It's over! Ireland have won it!
I remember we went back to the Green Isle Hotel where we were staying, and Liam Toohey and his wife Sheila were there, and Toohey says to me, well, what do you think? That is the best that we could ever play. Now, from now on in, we could be in a little bit of trouble, but that is the best that we could ever play. He said, yeah, he said it was quite something.
And one of the finest teams in Europe have been humbled.
It was always going to be a very tough game because the opposition throughout the years, you know, there are probably 6 or 7 international sides of real top quality with great pedigrees that you can think of that you know once you play against them that you're up against some of the best players in the world.
The Dutch had gone to the World Cup final in 1974, beaten by the hosts in the final. They'd gone to the World Cup final in 1978, beaten in the final match by the hosts, Argentina. So Holland was a top country.
I recall turning to one of my colleagues and said, you know, we're going to be writing about this day for years to come. And it turned out like that. There was a certain element of expectancy, of excitement, all round the ground. and that was in the press box as well. People sensed there was something special on the day we played Holland.
The expectations were high enough, yes, because Giles had raised the expectations following the big wins that he had, the good performances of the team, and the fact that it was a young team and we had three classy Arsenal players, Stapleton, Brady, O'Leary, all coming through at the same time, Jerry Daly, a lot of young players. Giles had changed the team from an old team to a very young team. Hand had inherited a very young team.
Hand adopted a policy of having a cut, having a go. It was more like traditional values with Ireland. Give her a latch jack type of stuff. And the build-up was much faster. And we got at teams in a way that we hadn't been getting at them for the preceding 7 or 8 years.
I remember the day was very windy and we lost the toss and we were against this strong wind in the first half, but we held our own, like, and the Dutch going ahead, Tahamata, I think, was the guy that scored for them. We created a lot of chances, I mean, mainly through the aerial prowess of Frank Stapleton. And I remember, you know, Jerry Daly, I think, equalising.
It's a goal that's, that I can remember sort of fairly well. There were opportunities when I got very forward in that left flank position and crossed the ball. I can remember it being sort of quite scrappy before Tony Grealish finally got the ball and played a 1-2, and I think Jerry Daly finished it off in very good style.
An underrated man for Ireland, Jerry Daly. Played generally on the right-hand side of midfield. A top scorer, Jerry. I know he took the penalties, but on the right-hand side, scored from play too, and scored from play that day too. Underrated man when you're picking all-time Irish teams. He has to be always in contention. And within 5 minutes, Mark Lawrenson had scored again. Now, those who remember Mark playing as a defender or defensive midfield player would be familiar with him making clearances, but a diving, almost off-balance header knocking it into the net was really something.
You know, it was a training ground thing. Liam Brady, like the little dummy run that he'd make, and then he'd check, and then he'd chip it into the space. And we had practiced it, and Mark Lawrenson was a bit like, Larson, more recently in the Euros, diving header. And, you know, we kind of knew there was no time. There was, whatever it was, maybe 10 minutes or something like that. But there was such a great feeling, and that went in, and the whole crowd as well. And to finish up beating Holland, who were, you know, big favourites for the game. So it was fabulous for me to get the whole thing off on a winning start. Like.
The game against Holland in Dublin had established the mood. We'd gone on, built on that performance, and now people genuinely felt that here at last we were in with a real chance of making the finals of a major championship.
Of the biggest crowd ever to watch Ireland play international soccer in Ireland, the vital World Cup game.
The whole thing was that we had to beat them in Lansdowne, and there was 54,000 at Lansdowne that day, and it was a fabulous game.
Robinson and Stapleton. Robinson's clenched fist says it all to his colleagues behind him. Lansdowne Road is alive with excitement. Away they go.
They were a great French team. Strong defenders, good goalkeeper, and of course marshalled by Platini, who was he was world class then, but he was to go on and be iconic. He was absolutely genius.
Here's Platini, and Coriolis moved, nobody marking him.
Ronnie Whelan, Rob Jean-Vian, made a pass to Robinson. Robinson made the next assist. Stapleton coming in to knock it in net, but Mahout got there before him. OG.
Good challenge by Whelan. And this is Robinson on the break. Stapleton's pulling away. Oh, good play, Robinson. Stapleton's far post. A great goal! That is a super goal! Marvellous goal!
A dream start against such great opposition that you would always like to get off to a good start, obviously particularly being at home, and for us to go ahead so early in the game was a wonderful start for us.
As always seemed to happen to us when we were ready to celebrate and charm ourselves with a goal lead, France equalised.
This is Ballone. Oh, it's a super goal. One of the best goals we've seen in a long time at Lansdowne Road. Ireland never got a piece of the ball.
So now we're truly up against it. But up against the wall, Ireland produced perhaps their best stuff.
No, it's Martin for Ireland. Back in again. Stapleton gets ahead. O'Leary. Stapleton.
David O'Leary did very well. He got down the right-hand side and just cut back cut it back nearly to the penalty spot. And Stapleton side-footed it in.
It was great for us, obviously, to take the lead again. And that was a long ball. I can't remember who played the ball in, but Dave O'Leary was on the end of it for Frank Stapleton to finish for us.
History rightly regards Frank Stapleton as a major influence in Irish football, and his performance against France that day proved it. Stapleton was a great professional more than anything else.
With Robinson qualified, Ireland had a dual threat, Stapleton and Robinson, up front. And it paid off in this match. Both Stapleton and Robinson scored.
And Robinson again, can he wrap it up? Yes, he can! And France have made a present of it.
Michael Robinson, new boy on the Irish team, got a passport because some of his relations once went through Dublin Airport. Frank scored, Robinson scored, and Ireland 3-1.
But look at how careless France were then. The ball was terrible. Robinson was alive. The keeper got a hand to it, but not enough.
But enter Michel Platini again. Fine goal for France to make it 3-2.
6. That's a beautiful ball by Sixtus Yondion. Chance for France. Stopped by Houghton, and it's in from Platini.
When you mention Platini, I could never forget Platini. Of all the midfielders Irish teams have opposed, I think Platini was streets ahead. Wonderful player. He was a scourge of Ireland.
France came then looking for the big equaliser, but McDonagh, this is when he really proved himself, and now he's one of the lads. Now he's what the Irish have taken him to the heart, and he did the job, and Ireland held on 3-2.
Seamus McDonagh had to make a great save right late at the game that would have given the French a 3-3 draw. He made a fantastic save down to his right, diving down to his right at the foot of the post. I think it was Platini again.
Seamus McDonagh came to Ireland as Jim McDonagh, goalkeeper called Jim McDonagh. And I think I was the one that said to him, you know something, you're James. Make the James Seamus and really become an Irish goalkeeper. Good idea, as to say.
Brilliant save!
The conditions on the day were, if I remember right, were very good footballing conditions, actually. And I think if, particularly any game at Lansdowne, and sometimes you don't want the conditions the best, because sometimes the opposition would want that. So I think you would like as much as possible in our favour.
The campaign for the 1984 European Championships had ended very disappointingly. We'd lost several of our games, and we had never really been in contention after the first few matches. So funnily enough, going into the first match for the 1986 World Cup qualifiers, the level of expectancy amongst Irish fans would have dropped significantly from a few campaigns before. So this was the first game, but ironically Ireland produced one of the best performances of that era to beat the Soviet Union. A cracker of a goal in the first half.
It's a strong run, it's a good cross, and here's Walsh! It's a great goal!
I think sometimes when you're playing against the European teams, you tend to know the individuals a little bit more. So certainly against Eastern Bloc countries, it was always difficult. You knew it was against good players, but players that you hadn't seen on a regular basis.
The problem was the two front men, which is the great blocking. He moved across the line with a fella called Rodney off, and they didn't play up front. They had 4 across the midfield, and then these 2 guys up front that kind of went wide. So who was going to pick them up? So we were working on that, the tactical side of that, to make sure that we didn't concede any early goals. And then once we had that sussed out, I think they had an early chance in that game. Then we started to impose ourselves on it, and I do remember the goal.
Referee gives him the advantage. It's a strong run, it's a good cross, and here's Walsh! It's a great goal!
It was a beautiful move involving 3 very good players, exceptional players. Mickey Robinson probably wasn't fully appreciated by Irish spectators. I thought he was a great player. And, well, Ronnie Whelan.
Ronnie Whelan was the initiator with a pass out to the right-hand side to Michael Robinson, and he put his head down, big barrel-chested guy, and he burst down the right wing, pulled the ball back. Walsh took a touch, controlled it, and blended into the corner. And it was in the at the Havelock end of the ground, and the whole place went potty. And it was the first time that I actually heard the Ole, Ole, Ole Brigade, because that was the Mexico World Cup qualifiers, and this song suddenly caught on. And around the old ground, you could hear Ole, 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 we're on our way to Mexico, and it was wonderful.
This was to be the last great win of the Owen Hand era. Owen had no luck, as other people have said and I've said earlier on. Oh, the reception was terrific afterwards for him, you know. It's like everything else. When you win, everyone wants to clap you on the back. And when you lose, everyone wants to clap you on the back, but they're holding an instrument in the right hand.
I remember it was a rainy, grey night in Glasgow. It was a cold, miserable sort of night. But the team and the performance just invigorated everybody.
I think we were confident because, you know, when you look at our team then, Liam Brady, Mark Lawrence, and, you know, with a lot of good experienced players helping the younger generation. I remember the young generation at that time was the Paul McGraths, the Ronnie Whelans, myself, people like that there. And then with the mix of course, Kevin Moran and Mick McCarthy. But it was really the start of Jack's era.
That's in towards Aldridge. That wasn't so very far away at the finish.
The Scots had come to Dublin 6 months earlier and got a 0-0 draw in a fairly dour match. And the Scots were favoured to win. There was a great Scottish team of that era.
Strachan to McClare.
That's the match that stands out for a lot of people, and it stands out for me for one reason. It was probably the best 11 players ever picked by Jack Charlton. We're all trying to guess Jack's team that day, you know, and he had a strong squad, and we're looking through it. How's he going to pick? Where's he going to put Paul McGrath? Where's he going to pick Ronnie Whelan? How can he slot everybody in? He did.
Cooper. And McGrath sticking to his guns.
I grabbed the number 2 shirt, which was the right back shirt. I just grabbed it because I thought, Jesus, I'm in the team. I was lucky enough to be in the team. It was a bit disappointing because obviously I'm a centre half and I wanted to play centre half. But when you look around at the size of Mick McCarthy and Dave O'Leary and Kevin Moran looking at you strange and Mark Lawrence himself, then you realise, you know, it's not a bad second prize to be picked as a right back.
And McCarthy was unaware of the impending danger. McGrath solved the problem for him.
We played pretty much on the break that day because the Scots did pour forward. It was a heroic performance by the Irish, and it was a very significant win because it was the first away victory by Jack Charlton's side. He'd taken over just a year earlier, and that gave the Irish the edge in the group over the Scots, the Bulgarians and the Belgians.
I remember them having a reputation of being a very, very strong team, but I remember going there thinking, you know, we need to get something from the game.
Galvin take on the full back and in towards Aldridge.
I don't think long into the game, I think Mark Lawrence was the one who broke through.
Frank Stapleton, in winning the free kick, which led to the goal, comes for the ball, prods the 2 defenders into fouling him. They collide, they're on the ground. Lawrence strolling up from midfield, calls out to Aldridge. Quick, John.
And that's quickly on, and the goal scored by Mark Lawrenson.
People haven't always given Lawrenson, I think, the credit he deserves. At that particular time, Mark Lawrenson was, pound for pound, probably the most complete footballer in Britain.
And with the bare 7 minutes on the clock, Mark Lawrenson opens the account. Malpas on the deck. Lawrenson shrugged off the challenge of the 2 Scots to bury that.
I thought I did okay. I thought at certain stages of the game I could have done better. You know, there were times that they were attacking and I was thinking, please don't make a mistake. This isn't your position.
In towards Strachan. Never dummy, but no one on his own side had read it. Paul McGrath. Houghton's trying to go for a run up the right.
McGrath could have played anywhere. He played it right back as if he was a natural. You know, he was one of those players that you could put him in any position. And that night, I think the left wing was Davy Cooper, who was a good player, played for Rangers. Never got a touch. Paul put him in his pocket.
A minute and 3/4 of added time played. Roy Aitken frustrated. The referee has a really good look at the watch, and the Irish prepare to celebrate. But they can begin in earnest now.
I think the win over Scotland at Hampden Park will be recalled as a watershed, because I recall speaking to Jack Charlton after the match, and don't forget now, it was far from certain that we were going to qualify for the finals, which we did, as it were. I remember him saying to me, you know, I think tonight, he said, I think we've come of age.
That was an end-of-season game, Ireland-Brazil. It was sort of a fixture that the FAI had been promised because they'd gone over there a few years earlier. And one player in particular, Liam Brady, was looking forward to that match more than anybody else, because he'd been part of a very under-strength Irish squad that had gone to South America some years earlier and been beaten 7-0 by Brazil.
It's a Swiss referee, Mr. George Santos, who sets the game in motion, with Brazil in those famous yellow shirts with blue shorts, play from right to left.
Even though the Brazilian team that played in Dublin that summer was not of the calibre of the team that had done so well in the 1982 World Cup finals in Spain, this was still a first-class side. They came to Dublin. Bizarrely, there was only just over 17,000 at the match, which was at odds with the crowds, the sellout crowds of 48,000 who were going to work at European Championship qualifiers during that era. So 17,000 went along. Those who stayed away missed a really good professional performance by the Irish.
Whelan, Byrne. Still of the pace there, but he's still battling. Aldridge has it. O'Callaghan. Byrne going in! And O'Brien just couldn't connect.
If there was a certain element of apathy among people, there was no lack of enthusiasm among the players. They knew what the game meant. They went out, they knew what they had to do, meeting one of the best teams in the world, and they were magnificent.
Brady. And that was Paul McGrath going in.
Brazil have always been, as far as I'm concerned, since way back before Pelé played, the dream team of the planet. So when we got a chance to play them in Dublin, and me then to get selected in the team was just unbelievable. You know, it was phenomenal.
McGrath. And Whelan. And McGrath once more. They really are finding very good space, the Irish. McGrath's shot.
I think it was probably a game which was the making of the team, because up until that we had sort of played a lot of friendlies, and you know, Jack had sort of tried to put a philosophy into us, tried to tell us that this is the way that I want you to play, and if you do this, you will overcome teams like Brazil. And we scalped them, and Liam scored a goal, of course.
Brady. Aldridge and Byrne. And now Brady again. Yes! Super build-up, and right on the half hour, a super goal.
Remember his goal? He went on a little mazy run, as he tends to do. It was in the inside right channel, and he seemed to run out of position on the right-hand side of the penalty area. It was towards the south terrace, and you kind of felt he'd run into a cul-de-sac, and he checked and came back inside. But Liam was always one step ahead of everybody else. Maybe not the quickest from A to B, but never started a day. And he got onto his left foot, and he just pulled a shot inside the defender's legs, past the keeper at the near post, and everybody thought he was going to chip it over to the far side. Wonderful goal, and that to Liam, I think, just drew a line under the sand of the previous expedition to Brazil, where things had gone belly up. Revenge was sweet for him, and he deserved it.
Well, watch Brady go to the inside right position, find the room. It seemed to be driven onto his unfavoured right foot, but he made the angle through the defence and then picked the short side. Just the place to put it, and 1-0.
All I felt I did that day was chase shadows, but at the end of the day, again, Liam Brady comes up with a gem of a goal, and I'm thinking, these are the Brazilians. They one of them's just going to decide, we're losing here, and put the ball on the top of the corner. But they couldn't do it, and so for me, that goes down as a personal favourite of mine.
Who would have believed it? But Ireland have beaten Brazil, the aristocrats of world football, on their first full international visit to Dublin, have fallen victim to this fella, Liam Brady, right on the half hour, scoring as sweet a goal as you're likely to see.
My sons are sick of hearing it, by the way. I was actually in the team that beat the Brazilians,
Brazil.
I think we're probably a bit apprehensive in the sense that we didn't really know. It was our first major championship finals, but we were playing England, so I do believe that everybody in there was determined 150% to beat them.
You know, as soon as we knew that we qualified for Euro 88, there'd been a lot of banter in our dressing room because we had Brian Robson and in our dressing room, and you'd be playing against the likes of John Barnes and you know, Tony Adams week in, week out. So there was always this thing, you know, we're going to batter you, and, you know, you're going to get your comeuppance and all this, or, you know, you shouldn't even be in the competition. All that sort of joking went on, and of course we were loving it because it was giving us the incentive to say to them, they actually genuinely think they're going to beat us, like, and all this. And if I'm honest, I think some of us thought they might beat us as well. When you looked at their squad and you looked at our squad, you thought, oh dear, it's going to be a tough one anyway.
And this historic first European Championship final fixture for the Republic of Ireland is underway.
When we hit them after 6 minutes with Ray Houghton's goal, the ball came down the left-hand side. Tony Galvin hooked across over the penalty area, which was won by John Aldridge in the area, beat two English defenders, and the ball fell perfectly for Ray Houghton.
And Wright and Stevens together, Galvin pulling it across. Missed kick by Sansom, in goes Aldridge, and Houghton! 1-0!
Houghton at 5'6" was, I think, comfortably the smallest player in the park. So it wasn't the kind of likely scenario that this little man was going to head a goal, but header he did. He climbed up, looped the header, and hey presto, was in the net.
Utter amazement actually when Frank Stapleton, I think it was, hooked the ball over. John Aldridge rises above of anyone. I think it was Tony Adams, and the smallest man on the pitch, Ray Houghton, actually pinpoints the header right into the back of the net. And then we're thinking, oh my God, we're one up against the English. Now it's back to the wall.
Good play by Aldridge to knock it to Houghton, and a superb finish by the little Scot. And it's 1-0 and 5 minutes on the clock.
During the first half, I'd actually jarred my left knee very, very badly. So I knew that at half-time I'd have to come off. I just knew that I wouldn't be able to last the rest of the game. And I said it to Mick Byrne, and Mick Byrne went, there's no way. He put ice on it, he rubbed it, he did all sorts. And he said, there's no way you can come out. You can't come out. This game, we're winning 1-0 against England. There's no way you can come off the football pitch.
Paul McGrath was banjaxed. His knee was at him. He shouldn't have even gone out in the second half. But he insisted on staying out there. He didn't want to go out in the second half. Charlton said, get him out there, you're playing. And he hobbled around, hardly able to do anything, but he was a presence.
Over the top for Lineker, McGrath in there once more.
Second half, England basically camped in the Irish half, and Paddy Bonner performed heroics that afternoon.
Back for Robson, good stop by Pat Bonner, and he earned his corner.
I had a few saves and a few lucky ones that had off me. But in general, I think we were very determined, and we believed in ourselves as the game was going on.
Here's Gary Lineker, and Bonner did well.
In some ways, we rode our luck a little bit. Gary Lineker, I can remember missing, a few opportunities to score, which was very unlike Gary Lineker.
Robson over the top, Lineker there.
He was neutralised, if not by his immediate marker, certainly by Bonner. I think Bonner was out of this world. He really was.
And Lineker, and Bonner did it again.
We won it with a combination of self-belief and a lot of luck. It was our first time at the finals, and no one really knew what to expect, but I remember talking to players about it. When they walked out onto the pitch and they saw the sea of green, it gave me an enormous lift. No one could underestimate the level or what the support meant to the Irish players when they were out there that day. They kind of thought there might be 4,000 or 5,000 paddies in the stadium. There was the Neckar Stadium in Stuttgart. It was over half filled with green and white, and we completely eclipsed the English fans.
The Irish fans, 11,000 of them, as you can see, are all here and in one piece and in very good voice.
And that was the beginning of the band roll. And don't forget that Ireland had never, ever, ever been in the finals of anything in their lives, European or World Championship. And here they were in the finals. And 2 years later, they were to be in the Worlds. And 6 years after that, they were to be in the Worlds again. So we're now one of the biggies.
And now the referee looks at the watch and blows his whistle.
Well, of the senior press guys, there were tears, unashamedly. I mean, guys, colleagues of mine, my former colleague Noel Dunn of the Irish Independent was in tears, and other colleagues as well, just broke down because they'd been at the coalface for 20, 30, 40 years. We'd never qualified for a major final. Here was our very first match in a major final against the old enemy, and we'd beaten them.
The excitement afterwards was incredible. I remember the next day in my stuff, to put a heading on it, the longest day, and indeed it was, I think. In terms of football, it was a day that lives in the memory still. Hugely important.
Unbelievable moments in the Neckar Stadium.
They were gracious in defeat, and you can't, I mean, you know, you can't keep, you know, pinching and pulling at them and saying, I thought you were going to beat us and stuff like that. But I'm sure we gave them a little bit of stick, all right. We didn't let them completely away, no chance. But we didn't carry it on. We just, you know, we just went around with smirks on our face for about a year and a half.
This is a massive match. If we could win this game, then we went into 2 home matches against Malta and against Hungarians. And if we won this game and then followed up with 2 more victories against those 2 opposition, we are very much not alone in contention for runners-up spot in the group, which would get you to the finals, but also to compete with the Spaniards for the top spot in the group.
And a very powerful Spanish team that's won all its matches in this World Cup qualifying group so far.
Spain were a very, very good team. And, you know, I remember the pitch being awful on that particular night, and Jack had sort of left the grass fairly long deliberately, not to allow them to build the game at the pace that he wanted to build it at.
Ireland will kick off, playing right to left as the skies cloud over. Horst Brumeyer of Austria is in charge at Lansdowne Road.
Now Europe at large recognised that Charlton had worked something of a little miracle for Ireland, and we were capable on any given day, particularly at home, of beating any European team. And that was the mood going into the game.
Notice there how they push up on the Spaniards. Obviously, if Spain are being hemmed in their own territory, they can't pose a threat.
Rather than let them get the ball, knock it 15 yards to another player, let him have a knock of it, flick it back to someone else. You know, to get tore into them really and kind of upset them and not give them time on the ball. So our game plan suddenly became, you know, how do you cope with it rather than, you know, you can play around it and stuff like that. You couldn't, because everyone was attacking together, everyone was moving together, we were fighting for each other, and they'd know where to pass the ball, really.
I think it was a degree of skill, but the underlying basis for the victory was the physical nature of the Irish team. It wasn't not unlawful, not it's beyond the laws of the game, but what it was, we imposed ourselves on the match, and it was a classic 1-0 victory from the Jack Charlton era.
And that's broken nicely on Cascarino to Houghton, but it's still Houghton. Men in the middle, Whelan's there!
The winning goal was a result of a classic move, goalkeeper up long one up forward, and then picked up eventually by Whelan, and Michel, was it, stuck the ball past his own goalkeeper. Oh gee, everyone said.
It was actually an own goal. I think Ronnie Whelan was fairly sort of instrumental in it and crossed the ball, and I'm not sure the individual, the player that actually knocked it in his own net, but we were certainly grateful for it.
Cascarino quite brilliant in that, discommoding the Spaniards. Houghton too, outstanding. And watch the little touch from Whelan that set up Stapleton. There was a rebound there off the Spanish defender.
Not a pretty game, because Jack didn't particularly, you know, like to get the ball down. He used to play 1-2 with the Angels, and it wasn't a night of pretty football at all. The goal was ugly, you know, but we won ugly.
This was a case where history actually repeated itself, because the match was decided by an own goal, just as it was in 1965 when we played them in the World Cup. The pitch was awful, just as the Spaniards complained about in 1965, only the venue had changed and it was now Lansdowne Road. And they also complained about the brutal treatment meted out to their star player, Butragueño.
And a foul, free kick awarded against Steve Staunton.
So effectively Ireland played them off the park, physically as well as technically.
For a win to sort of firmly put us on our way to the World Cup in 1990, our first World Cup, was something that we'd look forward to from the European Championships in '88.
And the final whistle sounds, and Spain's first World Cup defeat is Ireland's first World Cup victory.
Quite apart from the fact that financial awards of qualifying for a big tournament, is the fact that it all rubs off on people, and people are happier and things like that. It is a simple fact of life that when your national team wins something or qualifies for something big, the reaction is huge right through the fans.
The conditions were totally alien to us. I mean, it was just so hot. So it was effectively a containing exercise on our part.
The tackle from behind was still allowed in those days. And in fairness to Mick McCarthy, he took advantage of that.
And already in the space of 7 seconds, the free kick whistle has sounded against Mick McCarthy.
I remember talking about it afterwards. He must have kicked Hadji up and down that pitch from the word go.
And now it's Hadji against McCarthy.
And as the captain, he was allowed to get away with one. Captains always do. You get away with the first one, and Mick was, sorry mate, when he put Hadji into orbit. He never let him get a sniff of the ball. It was a pretty dour, unattractive spectacle. It was edge of the seat tension, but as a match, it was shockingly low in thrills.
Quinn Cascarino!
From sort of past the hour mark, it was only going one way, extra time. And extra time, it was only going to go one way, penalties. For the 90 minutes and the extra time, it's a match that very few people remember anything about, except it was hot and McCarthy felt a lot.
And the foul committed on Radul Choyu by Mick McCarthy.
Oh, it was a tough tour game. Neither of them wanted to lose, that was obvious. And the nearer it got to full time, the more obvious it became that, please God, don't let it be me who makes the mistake that would put us out of the World Cup. So I think, although most footballers would deny that they were playing for the penalties, I think deep down, eventually they were delighted to get to that stage.
And O'Leary is making himself ready.
It's funny the way life turns, how that evolved. Towards the close of the game, Steve Staunton went off, and he was replaced by David O'Leary. David's only involvement in Italia 90. He wouldn't have been on Jack Charlton's mailing list at Christmas, but there he was. And then it came to the penalties.
Ireland's 8th final against Romania has ended in a scoreless draw. So for the very first time, the Republic of Ireland team is involved in a penalty shootout.
Between the end of the match, the end of the extra time and the penalties taking place, it seemed like about an hour. And you could see Jack out in the centre pitch, the lads all sat down, and Mick Burner's doing the rubs. And we're all in the press box, and we're trying to work out, what happens now? Who takes them? Who's allowed to take them? If a fella's gone off, can he come back on again? No one knew. We were all like headless chickens. And we were supposed to be the sort of cold, detached, rational people, trying to convey, the message back to our people at home. What was it like? None of us knew what was going on. But we eventually got our heads on for it. And, the rest, as I say, is history.
Days before that, we had spoken about the possibility of penalties and what I should do, and as each person ran up to the thing. So I was totally focused. I felt very good because I had played well in the game. I had a few good saves and I had a shutout.
And Hadji shot again, well saved by Bonner.
So I was very focused on what I wanted to do. And then, of course, when the penalty started, I was going the right way, and I think I went the right way for every single penalty.
Bonner furious with himself. Again, he guessed correctly. Silvio Lung has been beaten 4 times. Pat Bonner has been beaten 4 times. And it's now Romania's second substitute, Daniel Timofte.
I thought he was very nervous. I thought his walk-up was very, very nervous. What I do know that, when we talked about it, and myself and Jerry, and the theory behind it, that if somebody stood at a very acute angle to the ball, that they were going to put it back into the same side. So this particular side that Timofte stood, he stood at an incredible acute angle.
Timofte against Bonner.
Packie will remember it forever. We'll all remember it forever. And they'll certainly remember it up in Donegal forever, because the boys up in Burtonport, in the fishing area of Burtonport, actually named a boat Timofte.
The nation holds its breath. Yes, we're there! And they're through to the quarterfinals of the World Cup.
Join us for part 2 when we feature more great Irish victories, from 1993 against Northern Ireland to 2004 against Romania.
Brady again. Yes! Deflection, danger, 2-0. Kennedy by the shot. Yes! And a little cross in there, and it's come through here.